So Dennis over at the Analog Archives YouTube channel is having a video contest in celebration of his 1,000 subscribers milestone. So I'll be responding to his questions about favorite concert stories, examples of non-metal albums I dig, and bad albums I love, as well as one of my non-music collections. So yes, this should be fun. You should stick around, of course. So the first question is actually two questions, but they're very similar. One is tell me about some of your favorite concerts or shows and why. And the other one is tell me about something eventful that happened at a concert or show. Again, kind of related. I have three concerts in particular I want to talk about. And they are either one or the other or both of those questions. So yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, I initially thought about talking about seeing Slayer during their Rain and Blood tour with Overkill supporting. I have told that story maybe 3 or 4 times over the years, so I'm not going to talk about that one. But I do want to talk about Slayer because I also saw them on the South of Heaven tour back in 1988 with Overkill again. I can't remember who else played. I think it was just Slayer and Overkill. This was at the Providence Memorial Auditorium, October 27th, 1988 to be precise. I had seen Slayer there, I think, a couple times now. But this particular show is pretty interesting. To explain the auditorium, they had the seats. They had these seats, rather, that were theater seats. So they're individual seats, but they're bolted to the floor, and they're in rows, much like if you went to see a movie or whatever. You can basically understand. So the show started. Overkill was amazing, as they always are. I think they were doing Under the Influence or pre-touring before Under the Influence. I can't remember. But it is 1988. And so Slayer comes on. I've got a number of people in front of me who are taller than I am, so I can't see the crowd beyond maybe a couple more rows in front of me. But I'm watching the show, and all of a sudden in the air is all of this stuff flying around. It's kind of white and spongy and odd. It's kind of just all over the place. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Is the roof collapsing? I don't know. And many songs in, you kept seeing more and more of this fluff stuff flying all over the place. It finally got the best of me. I had to grab one of these chunks out of the air and figure out what it is. And it definitely had that sort of cushiony kind of feel to it. And I started to suspect what it was, but I wasn't sure. Then maybe another song or two into the set, these objects started flying, these rather sort of square-shaped objects. And they looked like they would hurt if they hit you. They weren't fluffy and soft. And enough of them were flying around. One had landed next to me, and I kind of picked it up and kind of figured out what it was. It was clearly a seat. And what the kids decided to do was tear the seats out of the ground. They're bolted into the ground, by the way, every single seat. Somehow, with a great deal of force, these kids managed to tear out, I forgot, maybe 15 or 20 seats wide by 10 seats forward. Like a lot of seats. And we're just chucking them left and right while Slayer's going. It was funny to the point, I'm watching the show, and then I'm watching what's going on. I'm watching the show, I'm watching what's going on. It was pretty distracting, but I kind of got it. They wanted a mosh pit. They got one. Pretty amazing. I didn't even read any of the stories after the fact, which I probably should have, to see if whatever the newspaper is in Providence, Rhode Island, reported on it. Maybe there's something on the internet about it. Let me know if you find something, because it'd be fun to read that. But that was highly memorable. The second show was 4 bands. They played at the Channel Club in Boston, which doesn't exist anymore. October 15th, 1991 was the date. It was Tree, then Believer, then Sacrifice, then Bolt Thrower. I went for all the bands. I didn't know Tree that much at first. I found out later it was their 3rd show ever. Tree is a hardcore band, a Boston hardcore band. Of course, Believer is a Christian death metal band. I think they were touring Sanity Obscure at that point. Sacrifice was touring Soldiers of Misfortune, and then Bolt Thrower was on War Master. Pretty sure of that. So before the Believer show, I ran into Kurt Bachman, who's the lead singer of Believer. And I had interviewed him for college radio months before. I think it was still in 91. And I had reminded him of that. He remembered me. He remembered some of the conversation we had. So he and I sat at the bar, had a bunch of beers, and talked metal. What's kind of funny about that was a friend of a friend came up to me afterwards. He's like, wow, you had a lot to say to the Christian metal dude. And I'm like, well, we talked about metal. We didn't have to talk about religion, you know. And there aren't rules in conversation amongst metal fans. You can talk about metal and it's fine. It was amazing to have to actually explain that to this guy. But it was a really cool conversation. We had a lot of bands in common and all of that. So after the show, I had many, many beers. This is kind of part 2 to the show. And I ran into Joe Rico from Sacrifice, and I was a huge Sacrifice fan at the time. I love those first 3 albums a lot. They played quite a bit from Torment and Fire. I was really psyched about that. But that's not what we talked about. And what was funny was he and I, well, I'll say me, I'm not sure about him. He seemed like he had a few drinks. I had many, many drinks because we started talking about metal and the conversation just didn't stop. I think it went on for well over an hour. My buddy who was with me was just like, are you going to hurry up? Come on. We mostly talked about Iron Maiden for like over an hour, I remember. I remember talking about Phantom of the Opera alone for maybe 15 minutes straight. And he was excited about it. He was telling his bandmates, he's like, no, I want to have this conversation. Go break down without me kind of thing. And it was just hilarious. So kind of my memories of the channel. I have a lot of different memories of that club. I really love it. It's sad that it got torn down in the 90s. Amazing show, amazing place, had a good time. So that's the show at the channel. My third show was September 6, 1985 at the Centrum in Worcester, Massachusetts. The Centrum now is the DCU Center. I don't even know if it's the same block or the same building. I haven't lived in Worcester in 32 years, so if you know, you can tell me, fill me in on all that. Anyways, I went to see AC/DC with Yngwie Malmsteen opening. AC/DC was on Fly on the Wall. Yngwie was on Marching Out, if I'm not mistaken. The story actually takes place before the show even starts. It's in the building, but before the show starts. All the lights were up. Maybe half the people had filed in, maybe less at this point. I ran into this guy, Cliff, that I knew. He was kind of a friend of a friend. And he had some pot, so we went into the back of the nosebleed seats where security couldn't find us, I guess. And smoked up a few joints, got really stoned. Incidentally, I'm not a big pot guy, so maybe I got really stoned because I almost never smoked the stuff and haven't in about 30-odd years. But we got really stoned, and then we had to take a piss, so we go out into the hallway. Typical hallway for one of these venues. It just goes around the perimeter of the building. So this is going to take a little bit of logistical explanation for you. So the bathrooms are such where there's a wall and a wall, and then there's a wall here. It says men's or women's right there. And so you just sort of go around it, kind of like airport bathrooms have that sometimes as well. So we look and we see men, and we're like, great, let's do that. So we go in, and we kind of just stop in our tracks because there are a couple things that are odd about where we are. My first observation was, hey, where are all the urinals, right? They should have those, right? And then everyone in the room had their backs turned to us. And then I remember Cliff saying something like, why does every dude have long hair? And then before we really could come to the obvious conclusion about what happened, security guy grabbed us by the collar and let us out. And we're like, whoa, you know? I think that's the sound we made. I don't know. Anyway, so we got brought back out, but we got brought back out the other exit, which at that point, once he let go of us, we turned around and we could now see that the MEN had a WO before it, but we couldn't see that from that angle. So, we walked in the ladies' room. I don't know why that was so funny to us. I also was like mildly bitching about the fact that they could have just written ladies instead of women and put that whole confusion to rest. And everyone else shouldn't get stoned, I guess is the other part. But yeah. So that's my story at the old Worcester Centrum seeing AC/DC. It was a great show, by the way. Yngwie was amazing, too. So there. So the next thing Dennis wants us to talk about is music we listen to besides metal and some examples. Well, the big thing I listen to that isn't metal is soundtracks. I have quite a love for both score soundtracks, but occasionally the sort of rock soundtracks as well. I'm going to go through a few of these for you. Definitely in the realm of sci-fi, you have to talk about Blade Runner 2049. I love this soundtrack dearly. It's a decent movie too. I have a little bit of a crush on Ana de Armas, so that might factor in, but this is an amazing soundtrack. This is Hans Zimmer, by the way, conducting. Pretty cool. Also, Tron Legacy here, Daft Punk. It's funny about Daft Punk is that I really love this soundtrack a lot, and I hate most every other Daft Punk I've ever heard. So there's that. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, of course, the best Star Trek movie ever made, Ricardo Montalban and his chest. Is it real? Is it not real? No one knows, but totally amazing movie. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, probably one of my favorite movies when I was 9 years old. I still watch this movie with childhood awe, but the soundtrack is also pretty amazing too. Star Wars, of course, if you're going to talk about Close Encounters, you got to talk about Star Wars. I saw this movie when I was probably 8 years old, Memorial Day weekend. The soundtrack just lives and breathes with me. And this is an original, by the way. It has everything in it. It's pretty cool. This one might be a little bit more obscure. This is What Have You Done to Solange, or the Italian translation there that I probably can't pronounce. Giallo score here. Giallo films, of course, are these Italian psycho thrillers, mostly from the 1970s. You could say the late 60s, early 80s, but the 70s primarily. This is my favorite Giallo film ever, in case you needed to know that, but I love this movie a lot. So I had to get the soundtrack. Also, horror movies, Dawn of the Dead, great soundtrack. You got your Goblin and all of that. This is a Waxworks pressing, by the way. Love Waxworks dearly, and great addition here. Ennio Morricone, of course. He's done a number of different types of movies. He's done westerns. He's done psycho thrillers. He's done the gamut of. I like some of his lounge music, though. I think it's kind of fun. Some of this did score actual movies, so that's pretty cool. Morricone is a genius. We all know that. The Fog, John Carpenter's The Fog. You always have to put his name before that. I just got this soundtrack, by the way. Pretty excited to listen to this specific edition. Again, Waxwork Records. They do amazing soundtracks. They always sound pristine and amazing. Even on vinyl, they sound great. So that's a pretty cool one there. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. I have the first movie and the fifth movie as well. I have the second and third movie soundtracks coming. I have them on pre-order. But this is number 4. I love this movie. Don't we all? Also, Rosemary's Baby. I do have an OG original from Paramount Pictures, or Paramount Records, I believe. But this is a reissue also from Waxwork. It sounds beyond amazing. Like, it's just incredible. If you can't chase down an original, or even if you don't even want an original, track this one down. You won't be sorry. Some other stuff that isn't really horror, or kind of horror, maybe near, I don't even know. The Blue Velvet soundtrack. This was a Record Store Day release. I think it was this year, pretty sure. Great movie, you know, Frank, Pabst Blue Ribbon, all of that. Over the Edge. Over the Edge was a movie, I think it came out in 1979. It was kind of a teen rebellion movie at the time. I think it's Matt, what's his face? Matt, help me with the name. Matt Dillon's first movie. Thank you, brain. A great movie. I always thought of it kind of as a 70s version of Larry Clark's Kids, without the foul language. It's a great great movie, great soundtrack. This is a rock soundtrack, so it's got Cheap Trick and the Ramones, and who else? The Cars, Van Halen, all that stuff. Pretty cool. Reform School Girls, probably one of my favorite exploitation films of the 1980s. Wendy O. Williams is in this movie, of course. Pat Ast as Eddie. It's classic. Got to see this movie. Got to hear the soundtrack. It's pretty awesome. Lesson Zero, the movie, but with a novel of the same name. I believe it was Bret Easton Ellis, if I'm not mistaken. He also did American Psycho. Wrote those books, rather. Great little soundtrack. It is a rock soundtrack. It's got a couple of little gems on it. Slayer doing Inagata-Davida, and Poison doing the Kiss song Rockin' All Night is kind of fun. I also like Glenn Danzig and the Power and Fury Orchestra doing, what is it, You and Me, Less Than Zero. That's kind of fun. Anyways, Less Than Zero. And what's fun about this one is the top loader. It actually loads from the top. Very strange. River's Edge, which is technically a metal album. So maybe it's a little bit of a cheat, but I love the soundtrack. It is half Slayer. But there's some other folks on here. Agent Orange, The Wipers, Burning Spears. There's the Fates Warning song, Hallows Eve. If you have not seen this movie, River's Edge, shame on you. It's an amazing film. Also, a little bit of James Bond soundtrack. This is Thunderball. I also have Goldfinger and a bunch of others. This is an OG. This is from the time it came out. And great music. Of course, Superman the movie. the best of the lot. Although I do like Superman 2. I think if you took all the mushy stuff out of both those movies, they'd be the best movies ever for kids, especially superhero movies. But this is a great soundtrack. Still love it dearly. And War of the Gargantuas. I do have a love for kaiju and near kaiju films. This one I just got. I haven't even listened to it yet, but I'm excited to hear it. Again, Waxwork Records and all that. But if we're talking about this one, we probably should talk about the Godzilla box set. This is my 15 soundtracks box set. It is amazing. I paid way too much money for this thing. Colored vinyl, special artwork, the whole 9 yards. It is monstrous. In fact, it's really hard to hold up right now. But here it is. Godzilla. Next up is some records you like, but you know are bad. And of course, bad can be subjective here. But these are records I'm going to show you that are often considered bad by many, but I dig, even if I occasionally agree on the badness here. So we're going to start with Baby Metal. I believe this is the debut album, self-titled. I have a weakness for the early Baby Metal. I think as they go, it gets more and more even too ridiculous for me, which is pretty ridiculous. But I still love this record and the weird Japanese-ness of it. Maybe that's the draw. I don't know. Anyways, there's that. Also, Herman the German with Herman the German and Friends. Obviously, Herman Rarebell of the Scorpions. This came out in the 80s. It has some guest spots on here. I think is Don Dokken on here. A bunch of other people. I'm not going to go through it, but it's kind of a ridiculous record. Almost an unnecessary record. Do I like it? At times I do, but it's really bad, just to put it that way. And that's why it's here. Journey, Frontiers. I mean, everyone loves Escape, or maybe everyone's sick of it by now. I don't know. This is the album that followed up. It's obviously not as good and all of that. I have a real soft spot for it still. I love Separate Ways. What else is on here? After the Fall is fine. Chain Reaction is probably my favorite. But yeah, Journey, Frontiers. Next up is The Time with Ice Cream Castle. I think you only really know The Time if you're really a fan of Purple Rain, the movie. Prince is in the movie, but really The Time, and particularly Morris Day in particular, is really the real star of Purple Rain. People get mad when I say that, can't be helped. But I love Purple Rain. I've seen the movie a zillion times and all of that. If I was guilty about any of my pleasures, I would call this a guilty pleasure, but I don't feel guilt, and neither should you. Yeah, this is pretty amazing. I still love If the Kid Can't Make You Come. It's the most amazing song title, but it's pretty amazing. And there might be ice cream in that castle. Who knows? Of course, we're going to talk about Kiss for a little bit. Obviously, music from The Elder. It's often considered their worst album ever. I love this goddamn record. I do love, strangely enough, the release that Casablanca originally put out with that track order. It wasn't the intended track order that the band wanted. Rather, it was arranged musically to sound better. I think they put some of the heavier stuff up front, or stretched it out rather. I saw the intended track order, and there is an edition out there like that. You can hear it as the band meant it to be heard, but I really hate that version. I don't know, maybe in part because I'm used to this one, but also musically it makes no sense. All the sappiest, slowest stuff is front-loaded on that one, and then you get the heavier stuff towards the end. It makes no sense musically. So I'm on Team Casablanca with this one. I like this order better. But yeah, music from The Elder, the concept album. Steel Panther with Feel the Steel. This is their debut album. You know, Steel Panther is one of those bands you're going to like them or hate them. Most people really do hate them. I think some people, even from the sort of glam metal era, don't like them because they're like, you're making fun of my music. I'm from that era, and I love that they're doing that. I think it's great. I mean, I can laugh at it. I can laugh at myself back then, too. Pretty easy to do. But still love this first album. I'm not sure if the joke still holds up many albums later. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But still like this one. Still listen to it on occasion. This is Poppy with I Disappear. Poppy is kind of an internet thing. She did a lot of pop music, hence her name. This was her one attempt at kind of metal, kind of not. It's poppy and it's metal. I really dig this album a lot. I know a lot of people hate her a lot and probably just dismiss this album out of pocket because she did it. But I dig this album. I like it, and I'm still spinning it. So there you go. And of course, we should talk about William Shatner and his Christmas album. This is Shatner Claus, the Christmas album. I did a Christmas special. You can go look it up on my channel. I talk about this album and a lot of others, especially some heavy metal Christmas albums. But still love this. It's ridiculous. You never know if Shatner's really in on his own joke. You can think he is, but you know. Anyways, I won't get into that. Yeah, William Shatner, Shatner Claus. Listen to it this Christmas with someone you love. So next up is, what else do you collect? Or maybe other hobbies I might have besides music? Well, if you take one look behind me, you know I have some books. In fact, that's a sampling of the books that I have. I'm going to rattle off some books that I think are kind of fun. Not going to go into too much depth about them. You can look them up on the internet and get more out of them at that point. First up, How to Be a Villain. Amazing. Evil Laughs, Secret Layers. Fun book. Also, Laughs and Jugs. This was put out by Underworld Amusements. It's currently sold out at their website. They may or may not restock it. You can bug Kevin about that and see. A collection of gags and beauties from those old, dirty joke books. Fantastic. Also, The Complete Manual of Things That Might Kill You. This is highly useful information because anything could kill you. Anything. And you find that out when you read this book. So there it is. Also, I have quite a few Mad paperbacks. That is Mad Magazine paperbacks, mostly from the 1970s. This is Mad Monstrosities. Fantastic. I also have a nice Spy versus Spy compilation there. The Mad Book of Magic. Necessary, of course. The Rip-Off Mad. The Non-Violent Mad. Of course, you got to have the Dirty Old Mad. Classic. Sometimes you're hoppin' mad. Sometimes you're mad as the devil. You can also have Mad's look at our sick world. It is clearly sick. This book will fulfill that for you. And of course, The Voodoo Mad. Also, I have a collection of filthy books. Dirty sex books, but they're not pictures. It's all text for the most part. The first one I definitely want to talk about is What You Always Wanted to Know About Bizarre Sex Obsessions. And since it is written by someone with a PhD, you know it's highly clinical and not the least bit naughty. Also, The Warped, the Tortured, the Obsessed 13 Perverts Bear Their Savage, Guilt-Ridden Desires. It's a real page-turner, trust me. And of course, the classic Hitchhike 69 by Norm Phillips. The best thing about this book is that my buddy Eric and I pilfered it from his dad's sock drawer when we were teenagers. I don't even know if he thinks that I still have this or not. By the way, Eric, I still have this. If you want it, you can have it back. Maybe you just didn't know where it went all these years. But guess what? I'm the one who had it. Anyways, it's ridiculous. In 1972, it's basically Xavier Hollander style sex letters type text stuff. So, yeah, fun. Lots of cock and pussy. You read that word 10 million times. There it is. Anyways, Hitchhike 69. You've been on that road, right? Of course, I'd like to thank Dennis for these great questions. I've checked out a number of responses to his thread, and it's really proven itself to be a great way to get to know some of my favorite metal YouTubers. Hopefully, you've enjoyed my own answers to these questions. In fact, just tell me you did. It'll be great. Speaking of Dennis, definitely go on over to the Analog Archives channel, give him a sub, check out his videos. He covers a lot of extreme metal of the classic era, and occasionally some other topics in and around that genre as well. I'll provide a link to Dennis's original video in the description of my video, so you can check that channel out and check his video out and all of that. As for my channel, this is the Accusation Network, where each and every week I cover metal vinyl collecting. I also do videos on classic and modern metal in general. If you like that, give me a sub, give me a like, share the video with friends, go to town. And of course, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.